which is going to drive me crazy, but we'll give it a shot. Here we are at the Feast of the Pentecost, the end of the Easter season. As was mentioned before Mass, it's been 90 days since Ash Wednesday. So if you think of it, a quarter of the year, liturgically, is our reflection on the Paschal mystery, a whole quarter of the year. It begins with Lent, when we prepare for and reflect on the suffering and death of Jesus, trying to come to grapple with the connection between the glory and Christ, glory and suffering. So Jesus dies, and then on the Feast of Easter, we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, which is really the announcement, the evidence that the way of Christ, the life that he taught and the life that he walked, is the way to life. Remember, with the death of Christ, it seemed that Jesus had lost, that all had been lost, and that all that he had taught and called others to turns out to have ended in defeat. But with the Feast of Easter, we celebrate the witness that no, it turns out that is the way to life. And then we have a long season that we call Easter season, which is a season of the year that I propose asks us a question. And the question that asks is this: so what? So what that God became one of us and walked among us? So what that Jesus lived when he lived and taught what he taught and preached what he preached? So what that he suffered and died? So what that he rose from the dead? What difference does it make? What difference does it make for our life? Now, some of you might be tempted at this point to raise your hand and say, "Oh, Father Michael, I think I know this one. This means we get to go to heaven after we die." But I ask you, is that what the gospel's been talking about? Is that what the proclamation is after Easter? That 2,000 years ago, God became one of us, walked as one of us, died as one of us, and rose as one of us. And then it's all on hold until the day you die, and then it becomes effective. You get to go to heaven. No, that's not what the gospel talks about at all. It talks about a real change of life. That something is different now and should affect every moment, every day of our lives. What is that difference? What is that? The answer should be so what? The difference it makes. To know that, we can go back to the second week of Easter, or if your memory isn't that good, we can go just a couple minutes ago when Deacon Dan proclaimed this scripture passage from the Gospel, because this is the same scripture that we recalled on the second Sunday of Easter. When Jesus... Someone needs to stand back here and catch me. When Jesus... Oh, hold on. When Jesus... appears to the disciples who are locked up in a room, right? And somehow Jesus comes right through and he appears to them. Remember that story?
Yes.
I can make this one credible. So Jesus enters this room. Now, recall that this is the first time after his death and resurrection. It's the first time that Jesus has talked to his apostles as a group. So it seems to me that whatever he said there would be what Jesus considers most important to say to the apostles in that moment. And who remembers what Jesus said to them? Come on, confidence. What is it? Peace be with you, right? The same thing he had been saying during all of his ministry. Do you know that in the Gospels, Jesus, I forget how many times it is, it's either 20-some or 30 times, that Jesus says something to the effect of, peace be with you, be at peace, do not be afraid. It's a constant greeting that Jesus gives to people. That's how he greeted his apostles. And then what did he say after that in that locked room? If we're going to move forward, we need to wake up. As the Father sent me, so I send you. Jesus chose that to be the first proclamation after his resurrection to his apostles. So it must be extremely important to get it. What Jesus was doing was announcing something new, a new chapter, a continuance of the action of his Father, which had begun through him. And now he says, as the Father sent me, so now I send you. Now, when we read or hear Scripture, it's very important that we read or listen very carefully, because oftentimes it's small words that define the importance and meaning of the words around them. In this one, it's the word as the Father sent me. That word means, in the same way the Father sent me, so now I send you. Now let me ask you a question. As you go through the ordinary days of your life, are you aware of that? Do you carry that identity? That you have been sent in the same way as Jesus was sent. Not kind of like Jesus, not inspired by Jesus, but sent by him in the same way. That as means as much as I was sent, you are sent. And it also means for the same purpose for which I was sent, I now send you. And what is that purpose? Why was Jesus sent to earth? Well, he talked about that in different places using different words. He said things like, I have come not to condemn the world, but to save the world, right? I've come not for the healthy, but for the... Well, what's the opposite of healthy? Sick. Very good, huh? He said, I've come not for the righteous, but for the sinners, right? I have come for the what of the world? The life of the world, right? I've come for the life of the world. I've been sent here for the life of the world. And then he says to his apostles and disciples afterwards, as I have been sent, so now I send you. Jesus is announcing a new chapter. Now the work will happen not through him walking this earth, but through his friends walking this earth. That's you and me. Do you carry that identity with you in the moments of your life? I have been sent for the life of the world. I'd like to share with you an experience I had a few years ago. You know, in my life, there have been some experiences I've had or moments that after that moment I'm different than before. It teaches me, it opens my eyes, I get it more than ever before. I'd like to share one of those moments with you. As was mentioned by Deacon Thomas at the beginning of Mass, I'm here this weekend on behalf of the ministry Food for the Poor. A number of years ago, I was, well, I should say before I move on, is there anyone here who is not familiar with Food for the Poor? If you're not, just go ahead and raise your hand. I won't yell at you or anything. So you're all familiar. Okay. So a number of years ago, I was with some of the speakers of Food for the Poor in Central America, in the country of El Salvador. And we were visiting some of the different projects that our partnership is involved in. And one of the places we went to visit was a community, a small community of survivors. These were people who were the survivors of a larger community that had been living up until 3.5, 4 years before that on a hill, on the side of a hill. And they had built, little abodes for themselves out of wood and simple, they were destitute people, but they lived up there until at one point a horrible storm came and hit that area, and it just rained and rained and rained. And in the middle of one night, the hill just washed away, like happened in Washington State 4 or 5 months ago now. And every single one of those homes that they had built was destroyed. And most of the people from that community were killed that night, in the middle of the night. We went to visit the survivors, who had been living in a small field right near there ever since then, under pieces of plastic they had. That's all they had for protection or home. When we met them and we were led to them, we were deeply moved, and we really felt a call that we needed to address their housing problem and get them into a place to live. So we went to our partners in our mailings, and the speakers talked about it during the weekends. I remember talking about this even before that. And we shared the story of these people. And as is typical of our partners, they stepped forward. Many of them stepped forward and said, yes, let's do this. So they raised money, got enough to build homes in a little community there. And the day we were there was the dedication day for the first half of the settlement, which was 15 houses. We had a ceremony with speeches and prayer and hymns. And then the president of Food for the Poor had 15 keys, one for each house. And he took a key for each house and handed it to one of the speakers. And we just happened to have 15 speakers there that day. It wasn't planned that way. He gave each of us a key that fit a house, and we were introduced to the family that was going to live in that house from that night on. So I got my family, and it was a young family, my young mom and dad, 4 children, an aunt, and a grandmother. They were survivors of their family. And we went to their house. They had never seen this before, and they were so excited. And so we went there, and we prayed, and we sang a hymn. And then I gave the key to the door to one of the little girls, one of the little daughters, who was so excited. She takes the key, and she runs up to the door, and then she realized she had no idea how to use a key. She'd never dealt with a place with a key before. So I went over and took her hand, and together we unlocked the door, opened the door, and this family got to walk into what from that day was going to be their home. Very simple place, 2 rooms and an overhanging porch where they had cooking equipment. But to them, a palace, home after so long. So we went in there, and they were, for me as a man, the most moving thing was I glanced over and I saw the father, this young father, and tears were just streaming down his eyes. That was very moving to me as a man. And after a few minutes, the grandmother came up to me. Now this woman, when you looked at her face, you could see how harsh her life had been. Just wrinkled and etched, and I'm sure she wasn't as old as she looked. But she walked up to me and she took my hand and kissed it, looked me in the eye and said, I always knew that God would send you. She said that with such a resolve. I always knew that God would send you. I'm telling you that I immediately remembered the words of Jesus in that locked room. As the Father sent me, so now I send you. And I tell you, never to that moment in my life had I ever had the depth of recognition of being sent that I had in that moment. That includes the day of my ordination. It was so powerful to me. And then I realized she wasn't talking to me. She was talking to you. She was talking to those of you who are the partners of Food for the Poor, because you made it possible. You're the ones that were sent, and you responded. Now, my friends, I have been traveling this country for 13 years, sharing the story of what we tried to do in Food for the Poor, to reach into the darkness of life as light and love. And I have been accused, now and then along the way, of preaching too long. Can you imagine that? The nerve of some people. Okay, I'll admit I preach longer than most. But I want you to know why. You know, when I was a young priest, and I was asked to beg for anything, I minimalized it as much as I could. I kept it as short as I could, and I didn't ask for anything. And I'm ashamed to tell you this, but the reason I did it that way is I wanted everyone to like me. I wanted everyone to think, oh, that Father Michael, isn't he a nice priest? And I had learned, if you want Catholics to like you, preach real short and don't ask them for anything, and they all think you're great. So that's pretty much what my approach is. Obviously, that's not my approach anymore. But I want to tell you why. I've seen too much. I have seen too much. I've seen too much of the suffering of the world. I've seen too much of the difference it makes when we care a bit. And I've seen the difference it makes in us when we care. I can't minimalize that anymore. I can't do that and live with myself. It would be robbing from the destitute, but it would also be robbing from you. You know, most of us here today will never have the opportunity to go and see what we're involved in, to see these miracles. I get to see it. So I spend the extra time to take you there, to tell you a story so that you might imagine yourself. Because the message I'm trying to give you is how important your life is. The difference it makes in the lives of others, and how beautiful that is. Here's a woman who is coming to the last years of her life, and she's living on a piece of plastic. And because you went, she now has a home with her family to spend her last years. That's an amazing thing. Imagine the thanksgiving she gives to God because of you, which is very holy in his ears. So I want to tell the story because I want you to get how important you are. You know, for me, I'm always fascinated reading accounts of people who say that they've had what we call a near-death or after-death experience. You always have to be careful, because some of them might be making it up, but I know that some really have an experience too, and I'm always fascinated to read it. And one of the most powerful things that I find in common among those accounts is they talk about that in that experience, they saw how awesome their life was, how incredible their calling was. They saw what Jesus talked about, that they actually had been sent to the world by God. And that their life was to make a huge difference. The heartache of their experiencing their life again is seeing where they failed. They failed to live it. The joy is seeing the difference they made. So most of you never get to go see, and I want you to see. I want you to know. I come here for two reasons this weekend. One is to thank those of you who have opened your eyes, opened your lives, opened your hearts, opened your wallets to what is very uncomfortable to look at. We just as soon pretend it doesn't exist. Destitution is a devastating way of living. And I want you to know the difference you make. Thank you so much. And even though I'm here for Food for the Poor, I thank those of you who reach out through other efforts. Because it's all about the work of Christ, not the work of Food for the Poor. I'll tell you what I love about Food for the Poor that motivates me to be a partner with them and to encourage others to join. The first is that in Food for the Poor, we don't look for good things to do. We look for the men and women who have been called to be there physically. When we find them, we ask them, what has Christ asked you to do? And what tools or resources do you need to carry it out that you can't get yourself? When they tell us that, that's when we get to work. Because what we're seeking to be is to be partners in what Christ has started. Secondly, how efficiently Food for the Poor works. Our overhead for management and fundraising every year is always well under 5%. Last year, it was 3.84%. We know that when you sacrifice, you want your sacrifice to get to people's lives, so we work very hard for that. So thank you so much. Please continue. For those of you who are not our partners, I come to invite you and even to beg you to take a leap of faith with us. Work a miracle for people that are in such need of encouragement and help. Build your life. Build your eternity with Christ. We are a tool for your discipleship, through which you become missionaries. And we're glad to be that. So, in your pews, and I apologize to the camera for a moment, I'll be right back. I need to get something. In your pews, you can leave it there because I'm coming right back. I'm not worth watching. In your pews are some brochures. They have a picture of a little child. If those of you near brochures could just take one moment and just kind of pass those around, make sure everyone has access to a copy, I'd appreciate it. They're very simple. They open into 6 different panels. The outside panels give you a short explanation of the type of ministries we support and where. The inside is the financial side. It has some specific examples so that you can see what can be done when you share some of what God has given to you in earthly blessing. If you look at those, you might be very surprised. The last two panels on that side tear off along that thick yellow line. That's an envelope for donations. There's a place at the top for your name and your address. We promise we never share that with any other organization. Underneath that, there's an area for credit card information, if you want to use credit card. In the long blue box, some check-off boxes by which you can get more information on other ways you can support Food for the Poor. And I'd like you to notice our telephone number at the bottom right there. If you have any questions, if you want to talk about a project, is there a good project I can support? Or you simply want to pray with us or for something, or ask us to pray for someone, that's an important part of our ministry. Call them at that number. Never feel you're interrupting us. Half of our ministry is to minister to you. And we're glad to hear from you, always glad to hear from you. And if you join us, don't be surprised, because that department often calls our partners and you simply ask, is there anyone or anything you'd like to pray for with us? And it's a big part of our ministry. So, that envelope, you put your donation in it, and then just moisten it along the yellow line, make sure it's good and sealed. There will not be a second collection for this today. The second collection is for something else. You know better than I think. But I'll be in the back of church at the end of Mass to say hello and goodbye to you. If you'd like to leave your donation with me in an envelope, I put those all together and send them to Florida. It saves us postage. Or you can take them home and send them from home as well. However you do it, I thank you for making your difference. Now, here's the deal. When you go out, I'm going to be out there. If you're not going to leave an envelope with me, you do not need to avoid me. Agreed? All right, very good. Listen, I pray for all of us that God will continue to give us great adventures of faith in our lives. I pray that in the end, on the other side, that you and I will end up together in celebrating what Christ did through our lives. May God give us that great blessing. And God bless you all on your way. Thank you.